look, he insisted on coming to Washington in the first place. So they wanted to get these agreements signed overseas. Zelensky said, no, I want to do it in Washington. And then when he got here, it didn't happen. And so I don't see that happening again. I don't see them conceding and letting him come back over here.
I want to start with some news overnight that suggests that Pete Hegseth, your Secretary for Defense, has ordered the Pentagon to stop offensive cyber operations against Russia. Does that sound like a good move to you?
Well, I mean, he's obviously looking at things that are happening on the ground, and they're trying to put some pressure on Zelensky to move towards a ceasefire or towards an agreement to stop the war. He seems to be the only one that doesn't want to stop the war, and they thought they had worked out a deal with him when he was on his way to the United States to sign the agreement, and then he again did not sign it after twice not doing it previously. So this is clearly an indication to him that, hey, the aid is not going to continue, so you need to come back to the table and work on getting a peace agreement.
What makes you say Zelensky is the only one who doesn't want to stop the war?
Well, I guess I could add potentially Europe to that as well. They don't seem to want to stop the war either. So it looks like President Trump is the one that wants to. And, you know, Zelensky cannot continue this war without the United States. I know that the European Union is trying to get together and enable him to continue. But I mean, from the things I've looked at and read, I don't see that being a feasible option for Zelensky. So I think Zelensky is going to have to come back to the table and work out a peace agreement.
What indication or guarantees do you have, or does Donald Trump have, that President Putin wants to stop the war? Because at the moment, he hasn't stopped shelling. He hasn't stopped advancing into Ukrainian territory. What indications or guarantees do you have that Putin wants to stop?
Well, I believe he said he would like to have a peace agreement. So,
And so did Zelensky, though.
yeah, but Zelensky doesn't seem to want to because every time the agreement's there on the table, he refuses to sign it. He's wanting a security guarantee, which, quite frankly, I don't understand how that's any different than joining NATO. So, I mean, is that a backdoor way to join NATO by saying I want a security guarantee? That it's not going to happen. So, he's going to have to rely on, the United States and Ukraine and Russia getting together and working out the peace agreement. But in the meantime, he's got to at least agree that he does want a peace agreement. And so far, he doesn't seem to have done that.
So the Trump team believes that giving a formal security guarantee is akin to giving Ukraine NATO membership, and that's a red line.
Well, I'm not saying that that's what the Trump administration says. I'm asking the question, what's the difference between that and joining NATO? Because if there's a security guarantee, that means that if Russia were to attack Ukraine again, then it's guaranteeing that the United States and Europe will come to Ukraine's defense. And I'm saying, how is that any different than joining NATO?
And the US wouldn't be prepared to guarantee that.
Well, right now they're saying that, look, if we have a mineral agreement with Ukraine and we have people in Ukraine working on the minerals there, that in effect would help secure Ukraine from further attacks. It is obviously different than a security guarantee, but at the same time, we've got to get to a point where there's peace. And right now, what is the outcome? What is the other option that's out there to continue the war for another 2, 3 more years? It's gone on for 3 years. So, what is Zelensky's proposal that Russia's going to pull out of all of the areas of Ukraine that it's taken and go back into Russia and say, okay, fine, we're out? I don't see that as a realistic option. And Zelensky doesn't seem to have any other ideas other than that he wants to pursue.
We started by talking about the US deciding to the Pentagon stopping offensive cyber against Russia. I assume that is a move to draw President Putin into talks. Do you think that goes too far? I know you work in the AI world. You're kind of in this environment. Are you concerned about doing that?
Well, he said that they would do that for everything except the NSA, and the NSA is the largest part of the United States that does those things. So I think it's a olive branch out there to Putin to bring him to the table and try to get a peace deal done. So, I mean, there's got to be both sides working at this to get the peace deal done. And at the end of the day, Putin is producing more weapons. He has more troops on the ground now in Ukraine than he did at the beginning of the war. And Ukraine is having to, from the videos I've seen and many have seen, grab guys off the street to go fight against Russia. So
Well,
it's not going
there's been a
well.
lot of pushback on that from the Ukrainian side. I mean, the idea of grabbing people off the street, abducting people for the front line, there's been a huge amount of pushback on that narrative.
Yeah, I know there has, and look, but I don't think anyone can dispute that Russia has a military advantage over Ukraine, and both in the number of people and the weapons, and Zelensky is not in a position of strength, as Trump said to him. So he really needs to try to come to the table and work out a peace agreement. Again, otherwise, what's the option? Just to continue having people on both sides die, and that's what President Trump is trying to stop.
Do you think that Donald Trump and President Zelensky can work together now? Do you think that's possible?
That's a good question. I think it's going to take Zelensky having to come back and say, "Look, I do want to work with you." I don't see Zelensky making his way back to D.C. I don't see that happening. Any kind of agreement is going to be signed uh, outside the United States.
So you don't
I,
think they can be in the same room again?
I don't see him. Look, he insisted on coming to Washington in the first place, so they wanted to get these agreements signed overseas. Zelensky said, "No, I want to do it in Washington," and then when he got here, it didn't happen. And so I don't see that happening again. I don't see them conceding and letting him come back over here.
Was there a sense from the Trump team that Zelensky had been disrespectful? I mean, I know there was this issue of the clothing was raised. Is that what is driving this, do you think?
Well, no, I mean, I think he was disrespectful in the public meeting where all the press was sitting there. I mean, you know, uh, he was disrespectful towards Vice President Vance and disrespectful towards President Trump.
In
Uh,
what
he,
way?
well, he was talking over him. He was saying that you don't understand what's going on. That this is going to come for you one day, and you don't see the future is you're going to have problems in the future if you don't he's basically saying you don't know what you're doing and talking over him.
Is that how that's how it was interpreted? Because I think the way that the Ukrainians have interpreted that conversation was that Zelensky was trying to warn, I guess, warn more generally, as he has warned in the UK, that if you don't deal with Russia now, Putin will come back and the influence will be felt around the world. He clarified, didn't he? He said, I mean the influence. You will feel the influence of Russia.
Well, look, we've dealt with Russia since after World War II. So I don't know what Zelensky's referring to there. I think the United States has done a good job in dealing with Russia, as their Eastern Europe is now free from Russia, and he's saying we're going to have to deal with Russia. Russia's military has been hurt by this war in Ukraine. Their weapon systems, they've had to replenish them and spend a lot of money, and as has been reported, he's been able to do that because the EU has been buying all this oil from Russia. So they've spent more money on energy from Russia than they have in helping Ukraine.
Do you feel more comfortable with Russia? Do you feel that you could trust Russia more as a country than Ukraine? Is it more natural to feel sympathy for Russia than Ukraine?
No, I don't think that's it at all. And I don't think this isn't about, feeling one way or the other. This is about coming to a realistic resolution to ending the fighting and the bloodshed. I mean,
And I
that's
think a lot of people, I think the difficulty is a lot of people have seen the way that Donald Trump and JD Vance were talking to the president. I mean, Zelensky has said that he, as a president, walked into the Oval Office and expected to be treated equally, and he didn't feel that he was. It feels like there is a sense that Ukraine is not an equal partner in this.
well, Ukraine would have already had its country taken by Russia if the United States had not stepped in with military weapons and money.
So
So
it's not equal.
is it equal?
It's my question to you: is Ukraine equal?
I guess the answer is no. The country of Ukraine is not equal to the United States.
Do you think Zelensky needs to go? Do you think that's the sort of end game here?
I think ultimately he probably will go. I would be surprised if he makes it through into the summer.
Because some people say that was part of the reason for the strength of feeling in that room was to it was orchestrated, it was planned. It was a way to get a rise out of Zelensky so that people could say, look, he needs to go.
No, I don't think that was the case at all. No, I think that the United States wanted an agreement, and they'd asked for it twice prior to him coming to D.C. And both times he refused to sign it after they'd already agreed to it. And then when he came over here, you saw Secretary Rubio talk about the fact that he tried to renegotiate what had already been agreed to by demanding a security agreement as part of the deal, and that was not part of the deal when he came over to the United States.
But you can understand why he would seek that, can't you? Given that his country is at war and the US would be taking billions of dollars of mineral wealth out of Ukraine, he would want something in return for that.
I think he's gotten a lot already.
How do you mean?
$300 billion of U.S.
Well,
aid
it's
and
not
military
300
equipment.
billion. It's not 300 billion. It's not close to 300 billion. It's far less than that.
That's what's been reported.
It's not accurate
Okay, and how do you know?
because I've got the numbers in front of me.
And whose
It
whose
is not
numbers are
accurate.
those?
Well, they are the recognized numbers. They are from the
Recognized by who?
no, they're developed by the Kiel Institutes. They're published in the Times newspaper that say that aid
Okay.
allocated to Ukraine by the US is 114 billion euros. It's still a lot of money, but overall, the EU and
Does
the
that
UK
include the weapons? The
have put
cost of the
well.
weapons?
A lot of those weapons, a lot of the development for the weapons was money that stayed in the United States because it was paid to US companies. So it didn't go into Ukraine, it went into US companies. The
Yeah, but
weaponry went to
it's
Ukraine.
still U.S. tax dollars that are spent on that, and now we have to replenish Stingers, Javelins, and Gimlers because we've used up the bulk of them in Ukraine.
But it's incorrect to say that you sent 300 or $350 billion
Well,
to
I think
Ukraine.
it's not necessarily cash; it's the total expenditures.
Okay. It's definitely disputed. Just finally, what's the sort of feeling generally among Republicans? Is there any unease at all? Are you kind of perfectly comfortable with how this is playing out? Is there any kind of question about whether Donald Trump is putting the US's reputation at risk more generally, I think, in the world?
Well, I think it would have been better if Zelensky had held up his side of the what had been agreed to prior to him coming to D.C., and they would have been able to get an agreement signed, and then we could go negotiate with Zelensky and Russia together, and reach a peace deal. So that would have obviously been better, I think, for everybody. That didn't happen, and so now we're back to okay, does Zelensky really want a peace deal? It doesn't appear that he does. Then you have the UK meeting and discussing things with France and Canada, and it doesn't appear that they want a peace deal either. They're now talking about they're going to put weapons and soldiers in Ukraine. Right now it appears the only person that wants a peace deal is President Trump. We'll see where it goes from here. But the Republicans right now are supporting the President Trump in this effort. He ran on this. He ran saying he was going to get a peace deal, and the American people wanted it and voted for him as part of that. So, yeah, the American people want a peace deal as well. I'm not sure why that's such a bad thing.
Hal Lambert, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.